Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new Ace in the Day gameplay for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's episode we shall be reviewing the P-63C-5 Kingcobra, an American fighter aircraft coming to Tier 3 and a battle rating of 4.0. For the purposes of our historical overview, we'll be continuing from where we left off when we reviewed the P-63A-10 Kingcobra, review available using the link in the top right corner of your screen as displayed now, focusing on the development and subsequent operational usage of the P-63C. With that, let's begin. The C variant of the Bell P-63 Kingcobra was to succeed the A variant in December of 1944 as the main production variant. Whilst the C did look very similar to the A and fielded the same armament as the A-10 subvariant of a single 37mm M10 cannon firing through the propeller hub, two 12.7mm M2 Browning machine guns mounted in the nose, and two 12.7mm M2 Browning machine guns mounted under wing, it also included some improvements. The plane was now powered by the Allison V1710-117 1325 horsepower V12 liquid-cooled inline engine, which offered the same base power output as the Allison V1710-93 as used in the A-10 subvariant, but provided 1800 horsepower with War Emergency Power active compared to the preceding engine's War Emergency Power output of 1500 horsepower. There was also the addition of an anti-roll fin under the rear fuselage to improve the aircraft's stability in a dogfight, and the total armour allotted to the aircraft was reduced from 236.3 pounds or 107.2 kilograms to 201 pounds or 91.2 kilograms in order to decrease the aircraft's overall mass. The P-63C was produced over two production blocks, the C1 and the C5, the C5 being what you're seeing on screen today, with the design differences between the two production blocks being negligible. A total of 1,227 P-63C aircraft were produced by the end of 1945. Operationally, the P-63C saw little service in the United States Army Air Force, instead being sent to the Soviet Union, much like the preceding P-63A variant, to be used in this instance in the Far East against Japan in a fighter cover role for friendly ground units. A total of 2,397 P-63 aircraft across all variants were sent to the Soviet Union. Additionally, the P-63C was delivered to the French Air Force, starting as the 26th of July 1945, where approximately 150 to 200 aircraft see in service. Whilst these P-63Cs arrived too late to see combat service in World War II, they were used in the First Indochina War, which started on the 19th of December 1946. Again, alike with the Russians, the P-63C1 and C5 would see service as fighter cover for ground units. However, as of February 1951, the French Air Force started to replace their inventory of P-63Cs with Grumman F-8F Bearcats. This concluding by September of 1951, with the last P-63C flyout occurring on the 6th of September 1951. It is worth noting that a number of experimental Kingcobra designs did follow on from the P-63C variant, ranging from the P-63D through to the P-63F, but none of these designs were to see longevity on the production line. And while our historical overview concluded, let us take a look at how the P-63C-5 handles in the skies of War Thunder Arcade. Today's gameplay is brought to you from the ground strike map Iron Range. For this we'll be using the following setup. Stealth belts for our machine guns, the reasoning being that in my experience the stealth belts are proven to be the most powerful, and the lack of tracer attributed to the rounds means we can focus on accurately guiding in the tracer infused shells of our 37mm cannon's default belts, whereby these default belts consist solely of high explosive fragmentation sentry tracer rounds, absolutely devastating against any given foe in the skies. As for our gun convergence, we are using a 400m gun convergence, only affecting our two wing mounted machine guns. This is for the purposes if we're forced into a turn fight, we'll try to keep our foe at a medium distance of 350 to 550 metres distance, and the 400m gun convergence will work rather well. As for our fuel load, we are taking the standard 30-minute fuel load to ensure we can make it to the end of the game unscathed on fuel capacity. We begin our analysis then by noting that the climb rate of the P-63C-5 is very strong in a sprint and able to match the climb rates of the best climbers at the battle rating. This going to the likes of the C205 Series 3, the I-185M82 and the Messerschmitt 109F4. In that for a 1,500 metre climb there will be no aircraft that's able to surpass you, but beyond that you cannot sustain your climb any further, as we're about to see. because this plane will struggle to sustain its climb rate at a 25-degree climb angle on more emergency power stints, unlike said aircraft we just mentioned, meaning that your long-term climb rate really starts to suffer, and you can find in order to gain approximately 4,000 to 5,000 meters altitude, planes such as the A6M3 will be able to achieve that in practically a single climb, whereas you'll need to do it over multiple stints, and the stints where you have to level out can prove your downfall. So instead you're forced to take a more aggressive approach. As we can see here against the Thunderbolt, we proceed to intercept them early on in the middle of the battlefield, and by doing this we can help our team secure the higher altitude regions at the start of the game. Now contemplating coming around from the KO 100, but it's a little bit too late as our friendly P-51 is going to shoot them out of the sky. With this approach then, what you have to consider immediately is that you're encouraged to push for as much speed in this aircraft as possible, simply because you want to keep suppressing your foes once you've knocked out the competitors up at the higher altitude regions of the sky at the start of the game. But oddly enough, the C5's nature contradicts this in terms of straight line acceleration. With your engine power alone, you'll go from your stall speed of 110 km an hour to 375 km an hour at a rather gradual rate, and actually feel rather slow for the battle rating compared to some of your competitors. But if you then add more emergency power into the mix, the picture completely flips, in that you have the ability to go from your stall speed to 550 km an hour insanely fast with more emergency power engaged. This can lead to a WEP addiction which you need to manage carefully, because if you use up all of your war emergency power before you enter a bit of a critical situation, such as you need to get away from someone who's hot on your 6, then you're going to have a spot of difficulty because you won't have any war emergency power to engage for a short period of time. And as we come over the top of the lightning here to rip them apart, we can now move on to the high speed controllability of the C5. In that as standard in its ideal speed range, you want to be looking towards a higher speed range of 400 to 550 km an hour, as that's where the control surfaces of this aircraft really start to come to life. But as you go to higher and higher speeds, as you're pushing towards your maximum dive speed of 980 km an hour, what you'll find is here you've got a very smooth package in terms of high speed control. In that your strongest control surface aspect, your roll rate or your ailerons, very high for the battle rating, if not the highest roll rate available. It will begin to lock up at 600 km an hour, maximising by the time you hit 900 km an hour with a 25% penalty. But this is not too difficult simply because you have a 300 km an hour window in which to start to compensate for the drop off, and therefore you can feel very calm in experiencing the tightening of the roll rate. This gives you the ability to follow targets as they try to dive away from you with relative ease. The only downside to this would be your rudder, where in general, at the ideal speed range, you'll find that your rudder is rather strong, and we demonstrate that here as we start to hammer it over the top of this Messerschmitt 410. And with the introduction of the underside fin, it helps stabilise the rudder somewhat, and it means that unlike the P-63C-5 this plane is not going to be flexing around as much when you use successive rudder inputs as we're demonstrating, giving you the ability to bring the aircraft about on a target or level it out much more easily, say for example if you decide to rudder out of an Immelmann. And in return that means you can be more confident in your application of the rudder. But as you go to higher and higher speeds, what you'll find is between 550 and 650 km an hour, you'll experience a 50% lockup penalty. And that means you lose a bit of precision in guiding yourself onto targets when you're in the extreme speed ranges, i.e. 700 km an hour plus. But you can compensate for this through the application of your roll rate, giving you the ability to roll yourself onto the best attack path, predicting where your foe is going to go. And finally, coming onto the elevator, it's decent enough, but do be wary of the fact below 400 km an hour, the elevator really struggles compared to at higher speeds, in that your looping circle becomes rather wide, and the elevator bleeds all of the energy out of this aircraft in terms of kinetic energy, meaning that being forced to use your elevator in a turn fight is a last resort, particularly when the turn fight goes below 300 km an hour. You want to avoid that wherever possible. The nice thing is, in a high speed dive, your elevator only takes a 25% penalty when you go from 700 to 800 km an hour, in that you'll feel a gradual tightening of the control surface, but nothing that you can't get used to, giving you the ability to pull up out of a dive rather easily. So with that then, we've seen, as we've been talking about our high speed controllability, how we're continuously harassing targets that are climbing up towards us out to spawn, and we're able to keep the enemy team down to lower altitude. And by taking this approach and the overall aggression, we're making the most out of our firepower, in that you do have a 280 meters per second offset between the muzzle velocity of your 37mm cannon and your 12.7mm machine guns, and we're focusing on getting the 37mm cannon to do the job. If you want to aim in your 12.7mm machine guns on a target that has a lead bearing, you need to look at the lead indicator and aim 3/4 of the way along it to accurately hit with the 12.7mm machine guns in my experience, at a distance of say 500 meters. As you close to the target, you'll find the amount of less lead you have to provide is actually less, and that you can start to aim more towards the actual lead indicator, if that makes sense. And as you go further and further away from the target, the offset in muzzle velocities will become greater effectively, so therefore you have to aim closer to the target compared to what you do with your 37mm cannon. Taking out the Messerschmitt 109 there, and we're going for the triple kill at this point, taking out to 0 and finally flexing onto the Focke 190A1 and ripping them out of the sky. And this goes to show how strong the high speed control of the C5 is. Now outside that, what happens in a turn fight? Well, your turn circle is average at best, slightly improved over the P-63A10 but not by much, and this means you're still in the realm of being average like the Yakovlev Yak-9U and the LA7. And when you go to lower and lower speed, you'll find that your turn circle becomes exacerbated along with the overall controllability of this aircraft as the control surfaces start to become heavy below 350 km an hour. And as you go below 300 km an hour in particular, this is where you're going to be at your most vulnerable. So you want to be wary of being baited into a low speed turn fight. And planes such as the Typhoon Mark 1B that you'll be seeing at your battle rating will try to do this on a regular occasion, because they have the speed to match you when you go into a dive, and therefore they can try and encourage you to go into a turn fight with them. And that brings us on to another downside of this aircraft, its dive speed acceleration. Now the dive speed acceleration of this plane is average at best. It's competitive with the majority of its battle rating counterparts, but it's not exceptional, which means when you have a foe hot on your 6, such as a Typhoon Mark 1B, do not expect to just be able to outrun them in a dive. They will be able to keep up with you. And as you go beyond 800 km an hour, your dive acceleration rate begins to fall off rather noticeably, especially as you head towards your maximum dive speed, as quoted earlier, of 980 km an hour. But outside of that, if you manage your situations accordingly, you can use your dive acceleration to your advantage to keep distance from those foes who may be above you and trying to swoop down on you, keeping at a distance of say 1.5 kilometers from you. The likes of the Messerschmitt 109F4 will be particular foes to be wary of in this instance. Outside of that, what about durability? As we've been using this plane as an interceptor, can it go after enemy bombers? Well, do keep in mind that whilst the durability of this plane is average at best, it can take a good number of hits before it falls out of the sky. You have reverse durability, in that your engine is behind the cockpit, not in front of it, unlike most conventional aircraft at the battle rating. Which means when you're attacking an enemy bomber, it's good to be aggressive, but not good to be flying past them and being shot in your back. Because when they're able to get their machine guns or their cannon armament in some cases onto the rear of your plane as you're flying away, they can really strike the engine and do considerable damage. Now it is worth noting you're only going to lose 25% of your engine's performance when it goes orange. When it goes red, you're going to lose 75% of your engine's performance, and that's really going to hamper your ability to be combat capable. So being aggressive when attacking enemy aircraft, pointing your nose towards them and soaking up the damage on the nose if needs be, is going to work to your advantage. What about altitude then? Well, we've seen this plane perform at 5,000 meters altitude on a regular basis in this demonstration gameplay, and what you'll find is this plane has a maximum altitude limit of 6,000 meters on both the engine and the control surfaces, at which point the engine loses a considerable amount of overall performance and your control surfaces start to become really heavy. But it doesn't feel so as you go to higher and higher altitude, you're actually at a deficit anymore, below the 6,000 meters point. And instead, the ideal altitude range for this plane extends from 3,000 all the way out to 5,000 meters. It feels extremely comfortable in that altitude range, and you can swoop from 3,000 meters downwards into the lower altitude region via boom and zoom attacks, or just cutting your way through the furball and taking down enemy aircraft with your 37mm cannon. And you can rinse and repeat that in a suppression roll, as we've seen as you go to the higher and higher altitudes. I'd just be wary around the 4,500 to 5,500 meter mark, in the fact that a good number of planes at your battle rating will start to become a lot more competitive there, such as the C205 Series 3 and the Messerschmitt 109F4, and they'll be able to start outperforming you at a high altitude such as that. But as we've been maintaining our distance from our foes and attacking them in advantageous circumstances, we've been able to make the most of this aircraft and being able to pick up a considerable number of kills. As the game comes to its end, it's time for us to start taking a look, I believe, at the post-game stats. With our 10 kills and single assist, we're able to pick up 24,742 silver lions and 3,278 research points. To defeat the P-63C-5 in a given matchup then, I would recommend the same two approaches as with the A10 subvariant of the Kingcobra. Firstly, force it into a low speed turn fight, particularly below 350 km an hour, where the pilot's going to find the control surfaces become rather heavy and the turn circle extended to the point that a Focke 190A4 will be able to turn with the P-63C-5 in these conditions. And if you can force this plane into a loop at such low speeds, it will hang there limp in the air for you to shoot down. Noting that the stall recovery time on the C5 is longer by comparison with the A10, as whilst this plane only needs to get to 200 km an hour, a slightly lower threshold than the A10, it takes a longer period of time to do so before the plane becomes controllable once more. The alternative approach is to use your more consistent climb rate in a good number of planes that the battle rate in, such as the A6M3, the I-185M82, and the C205 Series 3 to outclimb the C5 to extreme altitude, i.e. 5,000 meters plus in the opening of the game, and then suppress it from above for a series of boom and zoom passes, whereby you only need to be wary of the potential yo-yo tactics that the C5 pilot may deploy in order to follow you in your return climb, but if you're able to manage the situation, in the end you'll bring them down for a boom and zoom pass. To conclude, I'd like to end on a comparison of the C5 and A10 subvariants to the Kingcobra, in that whilst both planes are very strong fighter-interceptor aircraft for the battle rated of 4.0, I think the C5 just edges the A10 in this regard. The reason for this is primarily the controllability of the aircraft within the ideal speed range of 400 to 550 km an hour and also at extreme speeds, while I think the addition of the anti-roll fin gives the C5 just a little bit more stability, particularly on the rudder, and in return that means you can fly the plane with greater confidence in being able to point it at the target or the destination of travel, and it's going to go that way in the first instance. Not to say that the A10 is unstable, but the rudder can cause you to lose a little bit of accuracy, more so than the C5. Also add to this the slightly improved vertical energy retention of the C5 over the A10, in that you have the ability in the C5 to conduct medium distance boom and zoom passes of 2,000 meter drops and then fly back up to your starting altitude with only a sacrifice of 50 to 100 km an hour speed compared to the sacrifice of 75 to 125 km an hour speed in the A10, depending on the starting altitude, hence the range. I think this sets the C5 slightly better in terms of the boom and zoom and interception rolls compared to the A10, but you do have to keep in mind that despite the improved turn circle on the C5, which is negligible really when you consider both planes are not really suited for turn fighting as standard, or at least in my opinion, the A10 does have some advantages in the fact that it has the stronger straight line speed retention, being able to hold its speed from the 660 km an hour mark compared to the C5's holding of 630 km an hour, and in the horizontal the two planes pretty much have the same average energy retention in the horizontal, bleeding considerable energy after successive manoeuvres. The only other item would be the stall recovery aspect, which the A10 wins in this regard, with its stall recovery speed being in the region of 230 km an hour, and it recovers to that point a lot faster than the C5 gets to 200 km an hour before being controllable once again. Hence with that, I'd like to say that the C5 is the Kingcobra variant which has the finishing touches. It just finalises on the Kingcobra strengths and its overall role, and as a result, in my experience, it's a very enjoyable plane to fly. And so I've been TX141, and if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. But until next time, as always ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies.